Before we jump in, I realize I need to give y'all kind of the lay of the land on the actual video because I jump immediately into explaining Clean Routine 2019, which was the project that we did in 2019 that was all brands that claimed to be clean. And I do think that it's important to touch back on that because it just adds context to like where I'm coming from as it pertains to this conversation. But if you're here to listen to me react to Tati'S videos recently, mainly her Q&A about her health journey, then I'm going to put timestamps to skip ahead. So understand that like I just launched into it and I totally understand that is like a really weird viewing experience. So I just wanted to give this disclaimer up front. Also, I'm still recovering from the flu, as you can hear. So on with the show.
This is not a takedown. I am not looking for clout by criticizing someone who has worked very hard to build her following. This is just me kind of feeling like I have to do my due diligence because I've been watching Tati's content for so long and lately it's just been making me itch. So if you don't know me, my name's Khaki and on this channel we spent the entirety of 2019 deep diving on clean beauty only. It was called Clean Routine 2019. I reviewed pretty much every clean beauty brands that identified as clean in that year. All the makeup, a lot of the skincare, and I really got my head around it. It was a time period where Sephora had just started their Clean at Sephora range, like, you know, dedicated area of the store, dedicated area of the website. And as a white lady who had, you know, dabbled in goop and was gluten intolerant and had, you know, lived in Austin for 12 years, like I was very primed to feel special by using only clean beauty, and it felt like it was something that was going to be the new thing. Like it was going to be a new frontier that turned into the way that all makeup was kind of thing. And like, that hasn't not been true. I feel like it did begin to influence a lot of the ingredients that were used or taken out of, or the way that certain formulas behaved and things like that from an aesthetic standpoint of brands that don't necessarily self-identify as clean. But the way that, I will just cut to the chase, you do not need to go back and watch me reading ingredient lists line by line for an entire year. You don't need to go back and watch those videos, but where we landed, I have notes. That's what I'll be looking at over here. One, clean is a problematic word. It was a word that as I started out the year, I was just using it because it was what the kind of understood vernacular was, but it became clear by the end of it that the implication was that other things, those brands, those products, and you, by association for using them, were dirty. And like, that's messed up. That's not just like hurtful, but it's also just really like preclusive and focusing entirely on privilege and just ignoring like entire intersectionality conversations that can be had around like the beauty industry. Nothing is black and white, right? Nothing is going to be completely unnuanced. And I do think, like I said, that the influence of this entire like movement that happened in 2019 had its little bits of positives, especially for like baby care and, you know, people understanding more about what might be irritating their skin, but that the word clean did not leave us with a good taste in our mouths, right? I forgot I was gonna put makeup on. I'm gonna start doing that. So the next thing was that clean as a word does not have an agreed upon definition. We tried. I tried to make this like extensive spreadsheet where I was like, we're gonna have our own definition of what clean is, and it's gonna be built by this community. It's gonna be crowdsourced based on the needs of you guys and your skin and blah, blah, blah. And what it came down to is that everybody's skin is different. And sometimes if you take certain things out of your microbiome and, you know, stop exposing yourself to them, either inside, outside, whatever parts of your body, you can become sensitized to them or to other things. I have many skin situations that emerged since doing Clean Routine 2019. I can't use any kind of fragrance on my skin anymore, you know, any kind of like a Bath & Body Works body wash or anything like that. I can't use any kind of styling products on my hair because it gives me breakouts and keratosis pilaris, things that I never had before then. So I'm not saying that it's a cause and effect thing, but I did notice that I was sensitized. I started getting like cystic acne on my neck and things like that after Clean Routine 2019. And I truly do think that I am a believer in, you know, the whole microbiome thing. It's very well documented that, you know, all of your bacteria on your skin, it has characteristics of its like society, and like the characteristics of the society in one armpit or elbow pit are completely different from the characteristics of the society in the other elbow pit. It's almost like a biological algorithm, like it's sitting there kind of like figuring out how to keep itself sustained, but it's, you know, micro-contained as it were. So like your stomach's like that, parts of your face are like that, things like that, and then it's also being influenced by things coming from the inside. All that to say, things are not necessarily always going to benefit from eliminating ingredients that other people benefit from eliminating, and it doesn't always mean that eliminating everything and only using good things, quote unquote, is going to be all across the board beneficial, even if it were actually possible, because it's kind of like your immune system or anything else. It's all about a balance. It's like this very complicated dance that, like, sure, we shouldn't probably have so much like DuPont chemical in our bloodstreams, which every person on Earth since like the 50s does. That sucks. But like, also trying to use our human minds to game the algorithm of all the cells on our bodies can backfire. Shocking, I know. So the reason that a lot of people think that clean doesn't have an agreed upon definition is because brands are malicious, right? And they're trying to trick us all the time, and they're using the word clean because there's no kind of definition for it, and they can just say that for anything. And like, that's not true either. We live in a society. We live in a capitalist society, and brands are going to do whatever they can get away with. But that doesn't mean also that like those two things aren't intertangled. That's not a word. But like, a brand can both have maybe malicious intent and also just have a different definition of what is clean and what's not. And those two things can kind of be interchangeable, you know what I mean? Because you can't really assign values to ingredients, always. Sometimes you can, but either way, I guess what I'm saying is like it's very complicated, and saying that one thing is good and one thing is bad and kind of talking about it in this like overarching, like just, you know what I mean? Like inserting it into conversation the way that Tati does, it can be without context and without like the necessary couching of those kinds of allegations within all of that nuance can be very dangerous. I'm getting ahead of myself. Of course I am. I always do. The final thing that I feel like we got, you know, besides like my big takeaway from doing Clean Routine 2019 was that like performance is tough to find in the clean beauty space. And I think that it's, like I said, gotten better because there's just become a blurred line in between the two of like regular prestige beauty and what some brands, you know, would call themselves clean beauty. But by the time you have simulated enough ingredients that something performs like a prestige product, it's virtually identical to other prestige products that you would find in a store, that the brand doesn't make claims about the ingredients being clean or something like that. And so, you know, there's only kind of so far you can go. And I like the innovations that are happening. There are a lot of brands that have managed to like take silicones out for people who have found that they are sensitive to silicones in their products, or certain silicones in their products, or just would prefer that they didn't have silicones in their products, you know, that still perform. And like, that's cool to me, like to each their own. And I'm all about someone finding what they like, you know? But the problem that tended to arise from that kind of like elimination process was the realization, and this kind of gets a little bit polarizing, non-toxic, the word non-toxic, I feel like it might not have originated there, but it seems to be kind of one and the same with people talking about things that are powered by essential oils, right? And like, natural. Like, not everything all natural automatically means that something's better. A lot of times, you know, and I've talked about this with skincare ingredients as well, skincare ingredients being in cosmetics, is the issue becomes sometimes things aren't meant to commune with your skin. Like a silicone is kind of great because, like certain ones can be kind of great because they don't commune with your skin. They just sit there and then they wash off. And like microplastics, yes, that's a thing, and like that sucks. It does. Like I said, it's not, like none of it's ideal. But as far as like you putting chemicals on your skin, it's much less likely that you're going to be sensitized, which is like the idea of clean beauty in a lot of cases, by a silicone-based product than something that is made with essential oils, because those are basically like hyper concentrated ingredients that, as Hiram always says, it's not necessarily that they're inherently evil, it's just if you're sensitive to a certain herb or something and then someone concentrates it down into an essential oil, they're basically just amplifying your likelihood to be sensitized to it. And it's going to give you like that exponentially larger amount of irritation, basically. And so it's not that simple. That's all that it is. It's just not that simple. But that's not the reason that I want to make this video. That was just kind of my background on Clean Routine 2019 and where we landed on it, so you don't have to go watch all the videos. The main takeaway that I feel like bridges the conversation to what Tati is doing right now is that my nose itches. That's the main takeaway. No, it's that clean beauty, clean, the word clean, it kind of became, you know, not just like a red herring, like, oh, well, it doesn't really mean anything and it's a marketing stunt or whatever. Even more than that, it became kind of radioactive because it started to symbolize this wellness to radicalization pipeline that began to happen, wow, as it turns out, at the end of 2019. The year after that was 2020, yes it was. So, things start to get hairy in terms of conspiracy theoryville. I'm not even gonna get political here. We just all know that it did, okay? And the terminology around those kinds of things, it isn't always, and it actually often isn't, it just completely, you know, bold-faced. It's not like, hey, and here are the ways that we're going to talk about this. Sometimes they are, but often they're not. And that's when we talk about the term like dog whistling. When you find somebody kind of saying something that sounds good, but like it's so simple that you didn't actually need to say it out loud, it probably means something different than what you think it does. You know, it's kind of, what did they used to call white supremacy? They used to call it like being a true American or something. I can't remember, but like, that's kind of how it is. Like, I see, you know, that on people's like Instagram profiles. They're like, true American. You're like, yeah, okay. Like, if you gotta say it like that, it probably means something different, you know? And so that is, I feel like, what started to just raise the hairs on the back of my neck with Tati's videos recently. Now, I will say, most of the information that is in my brain relative to the wellness to radicalization pipeline is because I've listened to so much Maintenance Phase. Maintenance Phase is a podcast that is hosted by Aubrey Gordon and Michael Hobbs, and they do an absolutely airtight job of unpacking, debunking, demystifying, presenting data, or like illuminating lack thereof on the wellness industry, the weight loss industry, the health industry, and just like the junk science around it. They have episodes on everything from Karl Lagerfeld to Dr. Oz to Oprah to, and I mean, it's just all incredibly interesting stuff. And they did an entire episode on the wellness to QAnon pipeline and just kind of how slippery that slope can be. So I will also give a disclaimer here that like I don't think, and I'm certainly not alleging, that that's like where Tati's going with this. I just think that she might be kind of inadvertently associating herself with ideas that have been pioneered by people who maybe she doesn't realize she wants to be associating herself with, you know? And it's kind of like who's gonna tell her situation, because I feel like she's coming into this with good intentions. She wants to heal herself. That's where most people come to this kind of conversation, is because they have some kind of health issue that has not been addressed by the traditional health system. Like they feel kind of left behind by it, or ignored by it, disregarded by it, and that is a valid a valid feeling, okay? I have cried in many doctor's offices or in my car after many doctor's appointments for very simple things, like being told that like my tonsils aren't actually swollen, and I'm just like, cool, I can't swallow, but like go off. Like no one in this video, no, me, I'm not trying to gaslight Tati and say that she is not feeling the way that she's feeling, or that like these things aren't resulting, you know, giving her benefits the way that she says that they do. But I just feel like I have to talk about this because we've trod these roads before on my channel, and she has such a large platform that talking about this stuff from just a personal standpoint, where she says, this is just me, she gives all the legal disclaimers and everything like that, we're gonna get into the video in a second. She says that, and then she goes into these very sensationalized, personal kind of testimonials and claims about just how great her life is now. And like, it's really hard for someone, especially someone who really wants to know everything about Tati and maybe aspires to her lifestyle and things like that, maybe has a parasocial relationship with her, a lot of people do, that it's hard for them to disentangle, this is not advice, from I feel incredible and I'm sharing a video about it. She's an influencer. That's influence. And I do think it's a little tiny bit short-sighted / irresponsible to get on there, give your legal disclaimer, and then give these kind of like high-flown claims about how incredible your life is because of these honestly kind of radical sounding changes that you've made to your life that at best are going to make someone feel kind of like inferior because they don't have your level of privilege, but at worst they could do lots of things. They can start to trigger disordered eating, restriction, and also, you know, doing your own research to try and find the truth on the internet kind of behaviors. And I feel like there could be a little bit more due diligence done there on her part. So let's jump into the video while I do my makeup, and I'm going to kind of pause it and comment as we go.
Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We are getting personal today. We are taking some time to talk about subjects that might be a little bit controversial, might trigger a few people. Yes, like I can sleep at night. I am gaining actual muscle. I am eating like a queen. I enjoy the food that I eat. It is delicious. I feel so truly nourished that I wake up, I'm excited for the food that I eat. And I hope you guys can see that in my videos, that I am a different person now. You can look back and you can literally see just like the stiffness and the inflammation, and it would kind of be all over the place. Like half the time I wouldn't know what was causing what, which was super, super frustrating. And lifestyle and stress definitely has a big play in that. But everything kind of like, you know, it all has to work together. Favorite water? Okay, so you guys know I'm a Fiji fanatic through James, because that's his weird, like he loves Fiji water, so I'm like, whatever, like I'll drink it too, it's great.
I want to briefly talk about bottled water. Just stop it. Don't promote buying bottled water. You know, there are people, and I'm not being like, oh, you know, your life is easy and other people's is hard, and I'm like comparing struggles, but like bottled water is a thing that can be very helpful for people who don't have water that is healthy to drink that comes from their tap, but that is not you. And I understand that Tati thinks that her tap water isn't healthy, and she does, you know, promote buying a filter or whatever, but talking about like every time you're thirsty you reach for a Fiji bottle, I understand that nobody's perfect, but that is such an easy thing to not do, is not buy bottled water if you know, live in a place where you can drink your tap water.
Now I'm a little more aware of microplastics in this past year, just kind of going on this deep dive. What I want to purify out of my system, what I think is disrupting hormones or potentially causing...
The purify language, that's super dangerous. I don't want to get too heated about this, but like the idea that we are toxic, dirty, poisoned, you know, that we need to like detox and purify our bodies is very dangerous talk. And this is coming from someone who has, you know, suffered from orthorexia for a very long time in my life. Because when you start looking into the things that you could be ingesting that could be dangerous and what have you, honestly, there are more things that you could find to be afraid of than any human, for the sake of their sanity and, you know, everyday mental health, should ever know. And that doesn't mean like remain ignorant. It means don't steep yourself in it, okay? Do what you can in order to maintain your sanity, to maintain your health, and make small changes, study, you know, one thing at a time. But having been through so many deep dives on that kind of content and also like talked to so many people who think that way, it starts to poison everything in your mind. And like, it's kind of like you separate yourself from whether or not it's even true. It's more about like, what can you do about it realistically that isn't going to drive you insane? Like, how good can you feel balancing the difference between having some kind of like unaccounted for minerals in your tap water and staying up late at night scrolling on your phone, finding out every way that you might be getting cancer? Which one of those is actually hurting you more? You kind of got to weigh the cost-benefit analysis. I don't know.
Causing other issues. So with water, I think filtering is a really, really important thing to do. I do not drink tap water. I find it alarming if you go online and do some research about water and look locally at the levels of different things, like not just fluoridation, other things like byproducts of other pharmaceuticals.
Okay, the idea of like fluoridation being evil, she kind of has touched on that a few times in other videos as well. And you know, that is kind of a conspiracy theory, and I don't know specifically about that one, but like pretty much every conspiracy theory besides like Bigfoot can trace its roots back to some kind of anti-Semitic thing, you know? And so we have to be really, really careful tiptoeing into making those kinds of like allegations when, you know, yes, if you OD on fluoride, it could be very dangerous for you. But if you OD on just about anything, that's why it's called overdosing. You can overdose on just about anything. And so, you know, a lot of times it's about the proportions of things. I'm gonna jump ahead here, but like when they're talking about like some of the main ingredients that she was talking about in her video recently, where she was doing a gift guide and she had gone to Blue Mercury and she was talking about all of the products that she got and how clean they were. She was talking about how they don't have phthalates and parabens and certain preservatives, phenoxyethanol even, you know? And it's like, I know the blogs that she's reading. I know she's running things through EWG, but when we're talking about those chemicals, we're also talking about the proportions of them. And you're getting a lot more of those kinds of preservatives in most receipt paper than you are in any makeup.
And even these days, putting salt in my water if I feel like I'm sweating and working out, I want to remineralize. I'm not afraid of salt anymore, be it the right kind. I just haven't been fully satisfied with my body, with my brain, with how I sleep, with how I manage stress up until now. So I think that's like the big like, oh my gosh, you mean to tell me eating healthy, saturated fat, good fat from animals. Olive oil would be one of the better oils that I sometimes use. Avocado, that I can eat butter. I'm mind blown because your brain needs fat. Your body needs fat. Aside from seed oils, which I have a bone to pick with, massive, massive way to just wreck your health. I feel amazing. You have authority over your choices. And I think that we miss that a lot of the time. We don't even get to the vision of the finish line because we stop ourselves by saying it's too hard, and we curse ourselves and we place that over ourselves saying I can't, which really is a lot of the time I won't, and you get what you give.
The next thing here is this weakness language, right? It is this idea that if you're not getting the most out of your life and out of your journey and out of your health efforts and things like that, that if the things you're trying and that are exhausting you aren't working, then you aren't working hard enough. As someone who had, malnutrition and things like that at certain points, as someone who has gone through, eating disorder recovery and been gluten-free I was gluten-free for 10 years. I was vegan, I was vegetarian, I was fruitarian, I tried keto, you know what I mean? The idea that you're gonna talk to people who probably came to this video because they have, at least curiosity, but maybe even trust in you to advise them, and that you're going to come to them in this kind of vulnerable position where you're sitting across the table from them essentially and tell them like it's their fault, they're not doing a good enough job and they're not working hard enough. And if they really could do it your way and work as hard as you have, then they would be seeing results. That's so manipulative. That's so messed up. And I don't know that she necessarily has an inherent goal other than to like tout the benefits of the way that she's living, but at the same time, she is what Michael Hobbes would call an N of one. She is an experimental set of one person. Anybody who wants to publish the benefits of the things that they have done in order to get the results that they have, you have to be able to repeat those results in an experimental scientific method kind of environment, and her not just touting the benefits, but saying that like it requires the amount of work that she was willing to do with the amount of money that she has and the amount of extra time that she has and the amount of privilege that she has to be able to, go to the doctors that she has and things like that, like access, that's just, it's so incredibly like alienating and tone deaf. It just gets a little bit like tough lovey in this way that's like actually really manipulative and kind of just like abusing that parasocial relationship.
It's really just down to that authority that you have with choice. Do I want to feel good temporarily, or do I want to feel good in the long term? I started my channel really passionate about makeup and being this researcher when it came to finding out drugstore deals and testing different brands, and it led me to this incredible career. And my passion right now is, sure, I want to keep reviewing makeup, but I want to educate myself as deeply as I can when it comes to nutrition. And I don't know what that looks like exactly for my future, but I know that there is this spark in me when I talk about it, and I do want to share, what has worked for me. And if it makes sense to you, then great. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then keep it moving.
So that. It's one thing to say like Manny MUA, where I don't know if he does it anymore, but he used to start his videos by saying, look, if you don't like me, don't effing watch me. And it's because they don't want to get the negative comments based on the friction caused between personalities. When someone's a strong personality, sometimes it causes friction because people can be opinionated and they just don't want to have that in their comments. Your comments are kind of like an ecosystem where it's like if you have people being toxic in your comments, it's going to discourage nice people from commenting because they realize that like, ugh, this is kind of an unmonitored situation and I don't really want to be a part of it. That's very different from her saying, I want to become an expert in nutrition. I'm not sure how that looks for me yet, which is, a pretty easy thing to cop out on. And then say, but if you disagree with me or if it doesn't resonate with you, then you can just keep it moving. Like, that's so manipulative. That's basically saying like, if you don't agree with my weird N of one junk science, then you can keep it moving. I only want people here who agree with me. There is agreeing with you on the performance of makeup. And then there's agreeing with you on the food you put in your body and your health, because that is life and death, okay? So to me, that's just two completely different things, and bridging them and trying to say that those are the same thing, like, not necessarily the same thing, but like likening them to the kind of relationship that you have with your viewers being the same thing. Like, do you trust me for makeup reviews? Do you find me entertaining? Versus, do you trust me to tell you what to eat based on what worked for me or what is currently working for me?
I just was overwhelmed. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I was having digestive issues. Every time I would eat, literally my stomach would expand, and I'm like, this is not right. I went to doctors. Some had good advice. Some were like, you're just swallowing air when you're eating. I think that was like the funniest piece of advice ever, where I'm like, I don't think so. And I don't know if I trust your assessment here, because like,
Okay.
I feel like I might be dying.
I know that this is starting to feel like a takedown, and I'm gonna balance it out here because, girl, me too, okay? I went to so many doctors to figure out why my belly was swelling every time I ate, okay? And I did have my doctor give me that stupid line about you're swallowing air when you eat. And I'm like, no, it's not that. You know what I mean? Like, there were so many red flags about what I was eating, and I had to figure it out on my own. And that's why I was gluten-free for 10 years. But I still had issues. I was still experiencing a lot of bloating and things like that. And I went abroad and it stopped. And I was just doing some research. I was like, oh, okay, so instead of doing a whole nother elimination diet, which I have done in the past, I am gonna treat this as kind of, my own personal N of one, because I'm not passing along any kind of advice to anybody. This is just about healing me. And I was like, oh, actually it was mainly about alcohol. That was why I was like, why can't I drink the alcohol here and it's fine? I can drink the wine here, but the wine in the US makes me really sick. And a lot of, my wine expert friends were like, they don't have the pesticides that we have. Like, they don't have Monsanto. And man, you should see boomers. They like crawl in their turtle shell when you say that. You're like, well, but if you just eat organic, they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. That's scary. And I don't know why, because it's really not that nefarious. Like, it's just not that like scary of a concept. It's not chemtrails, but it's like, maybe we shouldn't be eating so much Roundup. I don't know. And so like, I personally, my husband has no problem with it. He's never had an issue, any kind of stomach issue. Plenty of people don't, but I seem to have issues with things that aren't organic or pesticides or herbicides or whatever. And so I stopped eating that stuff for a long time. And then I realized I had accidentally been eating gluten for a while because I bought the wrong panko. I used it in a lot of stuff. And there were also other little things where I like ate something by accident and had no reaction when like, usually a bite of gluten would just, put me in bed. And so I decided to kind of challenge myself, and turns out I've eaten organic long enough, like almost entirely organic long enough, that I've healed my gut, which is cool, and so it's like now I can partake in some gluten in my life. I can eat regular pasta now as long as it's organic and stuff like that. I'm just trying to be as safe as possible. The bottom line is it's a lot more complicated than your results translating to somebody else's results. It's so much more complicated. And that's something that doctors do not do a very good job of addressing. And it's why I feel like, non-traditional US medicine, because I know there's like traditional Chinese medicine, like, I guess what I'm saying is like the mainstream medical system in the US doesn't do an amazing job of addressing these things unless you get really, really lucky and find yourself a great doctor. But that doesn't mean that it's all or nothing, and that doesn't mean that everyone's results are because of the same issue and that everyone's solution is going to be the same solution. And it doesn't, and I'm not saying that she's saying that necessarily, but it's just that like, it's not just complicated person to person. It's complicated year to year for the same person kind of thing. Things change in your own body all the time. And so fact and fiction are kind of difficult to disentangle, because what really matters is your experience. And sometimes it's better just to not screw with it if you're fine. I just don't want her scaring other people who are like my husband, who have no problem with food, into creating a paranoid problem with food in their life, or their water, or their toothpaste, or whatever. That's actually doing harm to people's mental health. And I don't mean my husband's gonna go watch Tati, I just mean he doesn't have any kind of gut issues, you know? And you can create gut issues. It's not all a positive change that could come from eliminating things from your diet. This eye look is looking awesome.
I now have my suspicions that seed oils were definitely also a factor in how I was digesting. They're very inflammatory, and I also feel like glyphosate in a lot of the, in all wheat products, which is a weed killer. It's Roundup. You can pick it up in a big jug at Home Depot. Glyphosate has been found in literal breast milk. Most urine has glyphosate in it.
See? That's what I'm saying. It's not that I'm sitting here telling you that everything that she's saying is BS. I'm saying that it's not all applicable to everybody and that it's not all good information.
Children's meals were tested across the nation. There was a group of moms that did testing for heavy metals and glyphosate levels, and everything was tragically unsafe.
Okay, so the language that sounds so innocuous about saying something like, and I'm not gonna sit here, if there's anything that, if I became a lobbyist or a lawyer or an environmental lawyer or whatever, the first thing I would try and take down is Monsanto, okay? Because I have a kid, and I just think that even the chance that he would get sick from something like that, it just makes me really angry. But setting my own crap aside, right? Because that's completely personal. I just think that the idea of saying all that stuff and then saying unsafe. Unsafe for what? Unsafe for who? We're not in a third world country, okay? Nestle is doing terrifying things in other countries, okay? They are over there trying to get women hooked on formula when they don't have healthy water sources. But telling people in the US that their food is unsafe when they might not have a sensitivity to the things that you have a sensitivity to is doing more harm than good. Those are not the same thing. Unsafe for you is not unsafe for everybody. There's a degree of awareness that needs to exist, but that doesn't mean that everyone needs to be afraid of food.
I am suspecting now that I have an issue with how my body handles oxalates. Basically, that is a vegetable's defense system. It's been wild, but removing vegetables from my diet, which I know a lot of you guys are gonna be like, no, Tati, no. But for me, removing them from my diet and hiking up the fat and the protein has been the biggest win of my life. And there are so many stories similar to mine. For the first time in my life, I feel 100% great, and I'm gonna stick with it.
Okay, and then, she gets into Botox, she gets into a bunch of other stuff, but one of the main things that I wanted to touch on was when she says that she basically has eliminated vegetables from her diet. She talks about how her entire diet basically hinges on meat. And she also likes to kind of rattle these things off when she was talking about in her gift guide video. It says things like, she'll be like, why would you want to put something on your eyes that has known carcinogens in it? And then just blows past that. You know what I mean? No contextualization, no nothing. And just it's just kind of part of the conversation as if we know what she's talking about. Red meat is a known carcinogen, okay? A carcinogen is just something that is known to cause cancer. I'm not a doctor, but as far as just going on the internet and doing your own research, these are the things that are also known carcinogens. And so I just feel like she's cherry picking a lot of her information in ways that's just in that echo chamber mindset of saying just, what do they call it? Confirmation bias, She's going on to resources online that don't challenge the way that she thinks at all. But speaking specifically about the, meat-centric diet. It's been called the lion diet, it's been called the carnivore diet, and it's big with, kind of tech bros and stuff like that. In some cases, it's kind of, still in the same conversations with people who are trying to kind of biohack and things like that. All these dudes who are going to masterminds and talking about crypto, they're just I only eat steak and salt, And I'm sure that's a generalization, but it's also cultural observation. So anyway, it has its its roots in the writings, teachings, speaking of a person named Jordan Peterson. And I very much recommend going and listening to the 2 episodes of Maintenance Phase specifically about Jordan Peterson. But he is an extraordinarily problematic character, okay? He is super transphobic, he's super anti-feminist, he's super, I mean, all the phobics, all the istics. I mean, he's racist, he's a misogynist, he's a xenophobe, he's a transphobe, he's a homophobe, like it's just, you name it. Not only that, his own methods led him to almost unliving. I mean, he was in a coma because of his own methods. One of the best things in that entire couple of episodes is listening to Michael Hobbs and Aubrey Gordon try and unpack and decipher his writing. It is word salad at best. At worst, it's extremely inflammatory and, oh, anti-Semitic. Did I say anti-Semitic? Because yeah, he definitely consorts with known vocal anti-Semites. And I mean, he's just part of this entire web of people whose doctrine just goes, well, I'm just posing the question and I just want to find out the truth. But then when you dig a little bit deeper, you find out exactly how they feel about the answers to those questions and what they think is the truth. And it's the kind of thing that fuels, you know, alt-right people. Okay, so that's as deep in the politics as I'm going to get. But like, I think I'm not saying that like Tati knows that. I'm just saying that like she's associating herself in the, you know, by making herself publicly part of these kinds of conversations, she's associating herself with things that I'm not sure she realizes that she's associating herself with, and she needs to broaden her scope a little bit. So yeah, I guess my culminating idea is just that I don't want to criticize Tati for trying to better herself. I've been on a very similar journey and I have figured out so many things about myself. And the way that she says it in the beginning of the video where she's like, I look back on the things that I thought were the answer before and I realized that like I hardly knew anything, and future me will probably look back on this and think the same things. Sure, yes, I totally agree with that. And I feel the same way, but having watched so many extreme diet creators on YouTube over the years and watching them all go through the same kind of fail forward, sometimes not forward, kind of journeys where they end up having to renege on their very like hardline philosophies and things like that around the way that they eat and even, you know, their lifestyles and everything like that. You know, it leads me to the idea that like maybe being a single person who has experienced results based on a bunch of different self-experimentation doesn't mean that you are an authority on how to live. And I know that she says that she is presenting it that way, you know, in the beginning, she's like, this is only about me and this is technically a Q&A. But the way that she inserts this stuff into her content outside of the Q&A context, the way that she presents this right alongside makeup and beauty content as, you know, part of the parasocial relationship, the way that she puts all these disclaimers out there, but then also just piggybacks right on top of it by saying exactly how unbelievably happy and like a new person she is. I'm sorry, like, you can only listen to so much of that before you start to think, well, is this a referendum on me? Like, is this the kind of thing that even a certain percentage of what she's saying I need to take on board as, you know, as advice? Because the reason that they make those kinds of disclaimers is so that they can't be sued if someone has bad results for taking their advice. That's the main reason that they do it. But also, you know, I understand that she is not an idiot. She also sees that these are not necessarily going to be the same results for everybody because we're all kind of, you know, living, breathing humans, and she has also lived through her own good results and bad results through self-experimentation. But I just don't know that it is a particularly healthy thing for to kind of expose people to this within the context of a multi-million subscriber beauty channel where people are going to they're already in a mindset where they're willing to accept your advice as doctrine, whether you tell them to or not. And I just think it's irresponsible. I think it's irresponsible, and I think that there are things we need to keep to ourselves, because the internet is subject to what is known as context collapse. Context collapse is a term that, I got from the book How to Do Nothing, which I highly recommend. And it's all about how you can't, basically means you can't control the people who your message reaches. And so when, you kind of throw all these disclaimers in there and stuff, like, sure, but everybody's in their own part of their life, and they might find this video because they're on a health journey. They might find your video and see that you have all of these followers. They might think that means that you have a lot of clout in a whole other respect, and see all the positive comments underneath your video and think this person is an authority on this, and just take your advice. And I think that there are blurry lines. There are just blurry lines, and I mainly want to treat this as if I am like sitting down with Tati as a friend, because I do feel like I have a little bit of a parasocial relationship with her. And I just know that if it were me having watched her content for so long, and if I were a little bit more kind of lost and at a different point in my own journey, I might take her advice on board too, because I would want to trust someone like her, because she is making it sound like she is so, vibrant and reborn. So I feel like at the very least, that kind of content needs to be counterweighted by, people like me, maybe taking the opportunity to have a little bit of commentary, that sort of like unpacks it a little bit. But maybe it needs to be even more than that. Like if she were my friend, I would take her in hand and I would say, I just don't think that this is good for your career and your reputation to be sharing the cross-section of the middle of your own journey with no other corroboration of the results, and like, you know what I mean? Like not couching it in anything other than that. That's just not something that's like responsible of her to be sharing with her followers in that context. So I know that I'm gonna end this video. I'm gonna turn the camera off and be like, there's 1,000 other things that I wish that I would have remembered to say, but those are my thoughts currently on this, and I invite your feedback. I know that there are going to be people in the comments who, come for me for X, Y, and Z. That's totally fine. I spent an entire year in 2019 doing that. Do your worst. But yeah, I mean, that's just my take on it, and that's all that it is. That's all that I claim that it is. I'm just really trying to offer, like I said, a counterweight to the kind of just blind advice from somebody who doesn't really have the authority to be giving it. I hope y'all enjoyed this. If you did, give it a thumbs up, please. I'm gonna stick a much less controversial video right here for you to watch, and I hope you enjoy that as well. If you made it to the end of the video, this is at least my makeup style and my personality, so maybe subscribe while you're here. You're probably gonna keep watching anyway, and I thank you for hanging out with me today. I love y'all so much, and I hope to see you in the next one.